I'm just going to say welcome to everyone. My name is Sarah Rupert. I'm here with Carter Dorscht tonight from the Ontario Field Ornithologists. You can say hello to us in the comments if you'd like. We will be getting underway with our presentation very shortly. Let's give people time to get in and get settled. We are going to have the presentation go through, and then we'll have a question and answer period at the end. So please put your questions into our comments. If you want to put them in as we're going along, or if you want to save them to the end, we'll be keeping an eye on things. Oh, I see. Hello, Luke. And you've got a former Suite saying, Ronald Valentine saying hi, Carter.
Hi.
All right, so we're starting to see people in. Oh, we've got 124 people on already, Carter. So I've really enjoyed getting to know Carter over the last year. We've been working on a bunch of different birding committees and projects together, and now on the board for OFO. And Carter's going to talk to us tonight about the 5-mile radius birding challenge. And he was very actively birding in his 5-mile radius last year, and he's going to tell us all how we can do it. And, we're all in lockdown right now, so it's a great time to really get to know our 5-mile birding radius and see all the cool things that we can see. I'm kind of lucky. My 5-mile birding radius includes half of Point Pelee, so I've got some pretty nice habitat in my radius, but I think everybody's probably got a little gem somewhere in theirs. So Carter's here. We're going to get going with the presentation now. So if you have any problems, questions, just pop them into the chat. Oh, we've got lots of people saying hello from all over the place. This is great. Somebody's applauding lockdown activities. Yes, we do too. So we're going to get started with the presentation. And as I said, Carter's going to be happy to answer any questions that you have once the presentation's over. So sit back and enjoy, and we'll talk to you at the end.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Carter Dorscht, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about the concept of 5MR birding. This concept is, I'm pretty sure, relatively new, but in the last year or so, it's really taken off, especially here in Ontario. So if you've always wondered what 5MR birding is, but didn't know how to get involved, or if this concept is totally new to you, then tonight's your lucky night. I'm going to be talking all about it. Here's just a picture of a snow goose that I got within my 5MR this past fall. So what is 5MR birding? The 5MR stands for 5-mile radius. And I'm guessing most people here are birders or are interested in birds in some capacity. But in case you're not, birding is the observation of birds in their natural habitats as a hobby. So therefore, when you put the two together, you get 5MR birding is the observation of birds in their natural habitats as a hobby within a 5-mile radius of your place of residence. So that's basically seeing birds close to home. Here's a picture of, not a very good picture, but of an American golden plover in the background there, and you can see its wings extended, showing that it does not have the black wing pits separating it from black-bellied plover. That was a pretty exciting find of mine within my 5MR this year. So one of the questions that has come up a bunch of times, especially when I started doing 5MR birding, was why do we use miles over kilometers? We're in Canada. We use the metric system. So, like many things, this concept began in the United States, and the name kind of became popular there, and it kind of stuck. So, using 5 miles as our distance, if you convert that, it's almost 8 kilometers, but it's a little bit over, about 8.05 once you round up. So if you want to keep that term consistent, like the measurement consistent, it's a little easier to say 5MR rather than 8.04672 kr. But this is definitely not the only thing that we still use the imperial system for in Canada. I'm guessing most people here probably know how much they weigh in pounds rather than kilograms. You probably know how tall you are in feet and inches rather than centimeters or meters, unless you've memorized your driver's license. If you're a fan of the Canadian Football League, they still use yards for their football field and for all their stats. Or if you're going to the local hardware store and need some lumber to build something, you're going to ask for 2x4s, not 5x10s if you're using centimeters. So there's probably many more examples, but 5MR isn't the first thing that we continue to use the imperial system for here in Canada, and probably won't be the last. But you can call it whatever you want. If you want to call it your 8KR, go for it. It's fine with me. So there's some good benefits of birding within your 5MR. Most obvious one is less of an environmental impact. This is mostly because you're not going to be driving as far to look for birds, which also, with gas prices these days, probably will save you some money too. Another thing you can do is discover new and maybe use some pretty good or great birding locations within your 5MR. If you're the kind of birder who regularly goes to known birding hotspots, that's where you spend a majority of your time because you're able to get all the birds that are possible to see there. You might be missing out on some lesser known or undiscovered locations within your 5MR that could be just as good, maybe better, or maybe like a rarity trap that you never knew of, or somewhere just fun to bird. And if you're someone who submits the data that you collect to community science programs such as eBird or iNaturalist, if you spread out your data throughout your 5MR, then you are able to kind of paint a better picture of when and where birds are being seen across the landscape rather than just data from one or two specific hotspots. So in terms of environmental impact, this is a picture of my 5MR here. I've highlighted all the roads here and I added them all up, and there's about 140 kilometers worth of roads if you were to drive every road one way distance. So that's obviously still a lot of driving that I could do within my 5MR. I could cover that probably a couple times within a day, which then still burns quite a bit of gas. So while I wouldn't be driving as far to look for birds, there's still ways I could do better at green birding my 5MR rather than driving all around it. So if you wanted to take it one or two steps further, you could walk, ride your bike, hop in your canoe if you got water, and try to lessen your environmental impact even more. You could also do other green birding initiatives like when you take your lunch, make sure there's nothing that you can throw out, a good lunch for the environment. You can pick up garbage along the way. You could go and plant native trees on your property or elsewhere where it's possible to help the birds. So you could do a lot extra besides less driving within your 5MR. Here I'm going to give an example of the spreading out the data. This is a very overgeneralized example. Obviously, this isn't perfect, but it's kind of just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. So this is downtown Toronto. There's quite a few birding hotspots along Lake Ontario here, Tom Thompson Park, Toronto Islands, and a bunch of other various parks. Here are 4 very hypothetical 5MRs that I just created. So if each person, you're gonna probably, every birder birds around their house, has a yard list, tries to see what they can see. But a lot of these birders are probably gonna go to along the lakefront, especially to the major birding locations here, and try to see a variety of birds in those green spaces, and waterfowl out on the water and stuff like that. So each person here, they're not even sticking to their 5MR. You see different colored dots all throughout. And they're probably collecting a lot of good data from these locations, but a lot of duplicate data as well, which is not a bad thing. But if each birder were to bird just within their 5MRs and spread it out, go to the various green spaces, that might not be as productive, but then you're able to collect that data there and you have a better understanding of where birds are seen throughout this area rather than just primarily along the lakeshore. So that's kind of the idea, is if you spread the data out, then there's a better idea of when and where birds are located across the landscape. So setting up your 5-mile radius. The main idea is that your house is right in the middle of the 5MR, and then obviously the radius is 5 miles from their circle. So if you're standing in your 5MR anywhere, then all of a sudden, wow, a Eurasian blackbird shows up, you can count that as a species within your 5MR because you're inside it and the bird is within it. If you're standing near the edge of your 5MR, looking out past the boundary, and wow, a flock of Canada geese flies by. Since you're within your 5MR, you can count that even though the bird is outside. If you're standing outside of your 5MR, and then a rough-legged hawk, you see it within your 5MR, and before you can get back into your 5MR, it flies off, never to be seen again. So I think technically this is something you probably shouldn't count, but it's up to you. It's your list. You can count it however you want. The bird was within your 5MR. So here's an example. I said earlier you wanted your 5MR to be, your house to be right in the middle of your 5MR. So a lot of people kind of want to manipulate their 5MR so that their house is still within it, but maybe now they get to move it so that this great birding location that's got penguins and these other exotic birds are within the 5MR. But technically, no, you don't want to do that. Here's another example. You just move your 5MR over ever so slightly, just so that that one tree that always got that owl in it is within your 5MR. Also, no, you're not supposed to do that either. So, again, your house is right smack dab in the middle of your circle. That's where it should be. So how to create your circle. There's a lot of various tools, apps out there that you can use to create a circle on a map. This one is pretty good to do it real quick. mapdevelopers.com/drawcircletool.php. You plug in your address, even though my address, it wasn't working, so I had to manually find it on the map. But regardless, either put in your address. If it brings you to your house, great. If not, just find your own house on the map. Enter 5 miles here as your radius and click new circle, and poof, you've got your map there. Some of these tools, I'm not actually sure if you can export your map from this or not. Some you can, some you can't. So the best way that I find to create these circles is to use Google Earth Pro. If you have a desktop computer or a laptop, this is a free download. Just Google Earth Pro download, and you should be able to download it. It's a great program. It's a lot simpler than something like ArcGIS for mapping software. It's pretty user-friendly once you figure it out. But this little circle up here, or this tool up here, the ruler tool, you click circle, you zoom right in, click on your house, and then create the circle so that it's 5 miles. And then you can save that, and you have a pretty good interactive map that you can use to study and tell if you're within your 5MR or not. So if you're experienced using Google Earth, you can actually save that file as a KMZ file, and you can create your own map on Google Maps. So if you go to Google Maps and open on the left-hand side of the menu bar, you click on your places, and then this brings up your map, a map like this, and then you hit Maps over here, and then you hit Create a Map. That'll bring you up a page that looks like this, that over here you upload your KMZ file to it, and there you go. It shows your 5MR again on a map. And if you save that map and open it within Google Maps on your phone, you then have an interactive map that will show exactly where you are within your 5MR. So if you're not familiar with where exactly your boundaries start and end, you can always pull out your phone and see where you are in reference to the edge of your circle. So again, this is my 5MR here. My 5MR, I like to think, is a pretty good one. I have a bunch of different habitats that allows me to get a variety of birds. I have this wetland here, right there, that is probably one of the most productive wetlands around here in the Algoma district. I probably haven't even mentioned where I am yet. This is Echo Bay area. Echo Bay is just east of Sault Ste. Marie, which you can kind of see here on the left-hand side, just the east end of town. So that's where I am, just outside Sault Ste. Marie. So yeah, this wetland here is one of the most productive wetlands around. Least bitterns, common gallinules, which is a very rare bird for this far north, and all of the rest of the, Virginia rails, soras, ducks, grebes, swamp sparrows. We've had yellow rail in there before, and all kinds of other interesting birds. I've also got a lot of open habitat that can give me some good owls. Short-eared owl I've got down here, northern hawk owl in these fields up here. So, and the open water, pretty good for most ducks and swans. This is a trumpeter swan, which is pretty uncommon for around here. The only kind of thing I'm lacking are scoters in this area. They might not just come here, or there's not great vantage points, so that could be I'm just missing them too. Lots of forest habitat in my 5MR, as you can see. A lot of the forest habitat is private land that's not really accessible, but there's enough of it that roads go through and places I can get to that I get basically every warbler and forest songbird that's out there. This is a morning warbler, which are actually pretty common within my 5MR. This here sound's going to play. You'll probably recognize it. It's not very loud, but Eastern Whippoorwill, my 5MR has one of the only reliable locations each year to get Eastern Whippoorwill as they become less and less common, so that's pretty cool. It's just down the road from my house. I'm also lucky that our long-staying black-billed magpie, which has been here since fall 2013, is just within my 5MR. So that's a pretty cool bird to see. And I've also had pretty good luck birding in my yard, even though I own just a small little half-acre lot. I've got bush on two sides and open areas to the other two sides, and I get a lot of cool birds, especially two very rare ones. I had a Black Vulture fly over my house, and a Western Tanager spent a few days eating oranges in my front yard. So my 5MR is pretty good, as you can see. Lots of different habitat. I'm going to give a few examples here now of not so good 5MRs and reasons why they're not so good. So this here is the very north end of the Bruce Peninsula, Tobermory, you see right here. So if someone lived, I picked just a random house, someone lived about here, their 5MR is going to be primarily water. And unless you got a pretty big boat to be able to go out and explore the water portions of the 5MR, you're probably not going to have a super high species list just because of the limited amount of land you have and I'm not super familiar with the habitat types in here, but you might just be not have the habitat types to get everything. So obviously the whole point of the 5MR is to not move your center point at all. It's right on your house. So even though you might not have the best 5MR here, it'd be a fun challenge to just see how well you can do despite the challenges it presents. Here's kind of something on the other end of the spectrum. This is down in Perth County. This 5MR is a lot of fields. A lot of fields. And I looked closely. There might have been one little creek, but I couldn't really find any significant water body in here. So you might have a hard time finding ducks. There's not even a lot of forested habitat, and I'm guessing it's private property. So you might not have an easy time finding a variety of the songbirds that spend time in the forest either. I'm guessing, though, you might not have any problems finding a northern harrier, or in the wintertime, I'm guessing there's snowy owls in here, or maybe even short-eared owls, I'm not sure, but if you're probably lots of field birds. Here's an interesting one. This is, I couldn't find an actual house, but there was a dock that I imagine went to a little cabin that just the tree cover wouldn't let me see. So I'm imagining that's where you live. This is the northwest, in northwestern Ontario, at the south end of Lake of the Woods. You have Ontario here, you have Manitoba here, and here you have Minnesota. Minnesota portion is called the Northwest Angle, this little weird little piece that for some reason Minnesota owns. Anyways, so you have 3 different jurisdictions here within your 5MR, and even though it's the center of it's in Ontario, most of it is, or not most, but the biggest portion is in Manitoba. So obviously, crossing the border into Minnesota could be an issue, so that could potentially eliminate that whole section from your 5MR to be birdable, or at least if you are able to cross, an inconvenience every time. And so yeah, for the purposes of like an Ontario 5MR, if you're trying to keep an Ontario list, I would include this entire circle as your 5MR. It's not fair to exclude most of your circle and just include the Ontario parts. I bird the whole 5MR. Here's another one. This is a unique situation that has come up regarding 5MR birding. This is Petawawa with the Ottawa River flowing through it. So if you live pretty close to the military base there in Petawawa, this is what your 5MR looks like. You have Ontario on the left here and Quebec on the right. But you got that river going right through it that cuts it in half. So if you wanted to go bird this top corner up here, it looks like there's some nice fields there. You could be some interesting birds. You're going to have to drive 56 kilometers to get there. So that kind of defeats the purpose from an environmental perspective of birding within your 5MR because of all the driving you have to do to get there. So if you do own a boat, though, or a canoe, or any kind of way to get across the water and it's safe and you have a spot to land on the other side, that would be a fun way to bird your 5MR by doing that, so that you're truly 5MR birding and not driving a ways away and then back into your 5MR to be able to do it. So a couple more examples here. This is the Chippewa Lagoons in Thunder Bay, one of the best birding locations in Thunder Bay. So if you I found a random house that made it so the 5MR basically cut the lagoons in half. So if you're doing true 5MR listing, as I explained before, if you stand within your 5MR and see things outside of it, then that counts. But what I tell people who have had this similar situations happen in real life is if you continue to walk, you walk across the barrier and just bird the rest of the birding location here without adding extra to your environmental impact by driving more, it's probably fine to include the whole location as part of your 5MR. It's your list, you can do whatever you want. So if you're super serious about 5MR listing, only include up till that line where you're standing, but most people I think would probably include that whole part as long as they can continue to walk and not drive. Here's another example where maybe you probably wouldn't include the entire park within your 5MR if it got split in half. If you live in the east end of Leamington, your 5MR will go into Point Pelee National Park. I'm sure most of you know is one of the best birding locations in all of Ontario. So for this 5MR, the line goes right after the Marsh Boardwalk. So if probably a good idea that since this is a noticeable spot, easy to determine that your 5MR ends right after the Marsh Boardwalk parking lot, then you probably should include the rest of Point Pelee National Park because it's such a huge area and a lot of good birds that you could see that technically aren't in your 5MR. So you have this nice, easy spot to stop birding within your 5MR. Of course, you can still go bird the rest of Point Pelee National Park. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. But for the sake of 5MR birding, probably best to include nothing past there. So how to keep track of your 5MR species list. There's a few different ways to do this. The big one, if you're an eBird user, is eBird allows you to be able to do this. iNaturalist as well. But if you're more old school, you always keep a Excel spreadsheet on your computer. Or if you're really old school, you got a journal, a pen or paper, you can write down your list. And here's a nice photo of some American white pelicans that my friend Trent got within his 5MR just down the road from my house, actually, this past spring, and I was able to go see them as well. Pretty cool to see pelicans here in the Algoma area. So if you're going to use eBird, eBird has this feature called patch totals. If you can find this under the Explore tab of eBird. So as you see, I've created a patch called Carter's 5MR patch. It keeps track of how many species I've seen in my life within my 5MR, which is 223. The latest one I saw was a red-bellied woodpecker this past fall. Keeps track of how many I've seen this year, which at the time that I screenshotted this was 33. And since it's the beginning of the year, we're still in January, I've seen 33 this month. So it keeps track of all those stats for me, nice and easy. And if I click on any of these three links, it'll then bring up the list of those actual species so I can see them if I'm interested. So to add a patch, click this Add a Patch button up here, and it brings up something like this. Type in your name here for your 5MR, whatever you want to call it. And then you start typing in here, you type in the name of each eBird hotspot or personal location that you have that's within your 5MR, and you add them, and then you save your patch to create it. And then all your data should be there that it draws from your eBird checklist. The one thing I have to say about patches, though, this is a pretty low priority feature on eBird, as it's strictly kind of for listers, not necessarily for data quality. So it doesn't get the kind of maintenance that other portions of eBird do. And it's kind of glitchy. If you add too many locations at once, or it sometimes just doesn't work or disappears, you have to start over. So I recommend if you have lots and lots of locations, add them slowly. Add 20 at a time, save it, make sure it's all good, then add more. You could risk it and add them all at once, but you might have to be doing it again. And so there's really no way around that, but once you get your 5MR set up, then your work's done for you. The one thing that especially if you have lots of locations, like I do, you have to figure out which of your personal locations and your hotspots are within your 5MR. So if you're on the desktop version of eBird, if you go to submit a checklist and then choose the location from the map, you can basically zoom into your 5MR area and it'll show on a map all the hotspots and your personal locations. And in another tab or window, if you have a copy of your 5MR, you can kind of alternate back and forth and just get a visual idea of which of those locations are within your 5MR, and then you can add them. I'm sure, too, if you're really good at computer stuff, you can overlay your circle onto this map here of your locations so that you don't even have to click back and forth. So for iNaturalist, same kind of thing. This one's a little, if you're not experienced with iNaturalist, it's a little more difficult to figure out. You have to export your 5MR as a file and then create a project that captures all your species within your 5MR. So you can make it so that it's only birds that the project records, or what I like to do is I have every species within my 5MR. So I actually use iNaturalist in addition to eBird to keep track of all the flora and fauna that I see within my 5MR. As you see here, I've identified 687 different species within my 5MR. 618 of them I've identified 2 actual species. Some of them are like random fungi and mosses and other plants that have been able to, but not to species. And just so happens that red-bellied snake has been the most abundant species that I've reported, mostly because unfortunately I find a lot of them dead on my. But yeah, so a lot of fun stats and information that you can collect using iNaturalist, not just about birds, but for everything. So 5MR birding in Ontario. In late 2019-ish, I decided that it'd be fun to kind of start 5MR birding more regularly. So I sent out a challenge to a couple of my local birding peers to see if anyone wanted to, take up a kind of a challenge to see how many birds we can find within our 5MR in 2020. And a few people not from this area, from Southern Ontario, happened to see my request and they wanted to get involved too. So I decided to expand it and do a 2020 5MR birding challenge for all of Ontario. So what I did is I created a Facebook group called 5MR Birding in Ontario as a way to promote this and 5MR birding as a concept in general. So if you're interested, you can join the group or search on Facebook for 5MR Birding in Ontario, and it should be the only option, and you can join it. The idea of the group is for kind of people to discuss 5MR birding. If there's any questions, comments, tips and tricks about 5MR birding, post there. And it's not, the main purpose isn't photography, not photo sharing, but if you find, super rare bird within your 5MR, it's good to post there. Or any bird that's exciting for you, you can post in the group. So starting on January 1st, 2020, I conducted the Ontario 5MR Birding Challenge that had 156 participants. And the idea of the challenge was not to compare yourself and compete with other 5MRs in Ontario, because obviously you could get stuck with, just depending on where you live, a very good 5MR, a very poor 5MR. So it's not really fair to compare yourself to others, especially too when we have people from all across the province, and of course bird number of species varies greatly throughout the province. The idea is to challenge yourself to find as many birds as you can within your 5MR. So it was obviously a great success, and so far we've had 90 more participants sign up for the 21 5MR Birding Challenge in Ontario. As part of the Facebook group, we created a map. Dan McNeil created a map here that shows where everyone's 5MR is across Ontario. As you can expect, pretty dominant here in Southern Ontario. A lot of birders down here, but then as further north we go, the less and less there are. But yeah, we got a good, pretty good map here showing where everyone's 5MR is. And if you zoom in, actually see the boundaries of everyone's 5MRs. It's kind of a mess down here in Toronto and Hamilton area, especially because there's so many overlapping 5MRs. Dan had to make them all different colors so that you could at least kind of work out where your 5MR was amongst the others. So most of these are right on people's houses, but if there were privacy concerns for a few people, and we just kind of put the center of them for the purposes of this map off to a nearby intersection, just so that the center of the map, the 5MR, wasn't right on people's houses. But yeah, it's really interesting to see where everyone's participating from. So now that 2020 is over, we were able to compile some results of our challenge. We, of the 150-ish people who participated, we got 94 people to submit their species lists for the year. And surprisingly, of these 94 people, we recorded 338 different species, which is pretty good considering I think on eBird there was 365 species recorded throughout all of Ontario in 2020. So us 94 5MR participants were able to record about 93% of them just within our 5MRs. And this included some pretty good birds. There were 30 species that were found with only within one person's 5MR. Here, I'm not going to read the whole list of them here, but if you're interested, you can read through it. Two of them were actually provincial firsts. Glaucus winged gull, it was actually near me here in Sault Ste. Marie, although I never got to see it. There was also the bean goose, which I believe is tentatively being called the tundra bean goose, seen in the Ottawa area, and a lot of other really good birds here we're seeing. I'm just going to go through a couple of the highlights that have photos with them. My friend Tony here got a tropical kingbird in near Thessalon, Ontario, which is actually fairly close to me, so I snuck out of my 5MR to go see this bird. It's, I think, will be about only the third accepted record of tropical kingbird within Ontario, assuming it gets accepted. But a really neat bird. These guys are found like in the southern parts of Texas and I think Arizona as well, mainly a Mexico bird, but they do have a pattern of vagrancy and show up all over the place in North America from time to time, but really neat bird. Anthony here has this white-winged dove actually at his house coming to his feeders, and I believe it's still there actually in Simcoe County. So this is a really nice bird to see in Ontario, especially for your yard list. They're primarily a southern United States bird as well, but show up all over the place in the north from time to time. This is another flycatcher. This one, a Vermilion Flycatcher, that was found by my friend Jane in her yard as well in Tarbert Township, which is here in the Algoma district. This one was very cooperative. Lots of people got to go and see it, but sadly, I didn't, even though it's only 15 minutes from my house because I happened to be out of town at the time. So this one was kind of painful miss for me, but I'm sure someday I'll get to see one somewhere. Steve had this purple gallinule down in southwestern Ontario. This is another southern bird that shows up in Ontario from time to time and elsewhere in the northeast. Quentin had this Gertland's Warbler in his 5MR in London. This Kirtland's warblers, if you're not familiar with them, are one of the most sought after warblers in North America due to their very limited range. Mostly they breed in Grayling, Michigan, and then they migrate to, I think, the Bahamas for the winter. But very few of them actually get seen during migration on their way between those two locations, so it's an exciting bird to see. This one is an rarity per se, but Kia had this Boreal Owl in his yard, I believe, in the Bruce Peninsula. Lots of them in Ontario, but the further south you go, the less likely you are to see them. And since they're a pretty secretive owl to begin with, you don't see a lot of them even if you're well within their typical range. So very cool bird. I actually had one of these within my 5MR as well this year, just down the road from my house. So very cool bird. James had this western grebe in Lake Huron in the Lambton area. This is a western bird that is seen in Ontario from time to time, but still pretty rare. And Roxanne had this northern wheat ear within her 5MR up in Timmins area. These guys they breed in the Arctic, kind of like Alaska or over in Nunavut, northern parts of Nunavut. And then they actually migrate down the other way, down through Europe and into Africa for the winter, and then back up. So, but from some time to time, they actually come south down Canada and into Ontario and the United States. So pretty exciting bird. But it's definitely not all about the rare birds either. You can probably find a lot of cool, exciting things within your 5MR that aren't necessarily rare birds. This is a picture sent to me by Brian of a Carolina wren and its young brown-headed cowbird. So I'm always fascinated when I see warblers and stuff with their brown-headed cowbird begging for food. So this is just a neat experience to see within your 5MR potentially. Here's a couple, commonly heard, or maybe kind of commonly heard, but not so commonly seen birds that a few people had within their 5MR this past year. Marie, had this eastern whippoorwill. She said she was out within her 5MR birding through the forest and it started to rain, so she took cover under a tree and just happened to look up and there was the whippoorwill sitting right there. So she backed up, snapped a couple photos and let it be, but that's a pretty cool experience. And then of course, barred owls, probably one of my favorite birds. Glenn got to see this one within his 5MR. And then of course, the typical backyard birds can always be very entertaining. Lynn had this Baltimore Oriole in her yard within her 5MR, obviously. And so yeah, you can definitely appreciate what you have right at your house in addition to what's around your house. And sometimes, like this, I had a really fun experience for birding within my 5MR this year. I got common gallinules. It was the first time of the year that they'd come back, so we confirmed that. And I think I had a list of like 60 species, including like gunlin and short-billed dowitcher, which are pretty uncommon for my 5MR. But all I had to take away from it was this good but photo of some tree swallows sitting on a branch right beside the viewing platform. So in addition to the 5MR birding challenge that I run, the Ontario Field Ornithologists are actually running a winter birding challenge right now that revolves around 5MR birding. So if you're interested in checking this out, go to ofo.ca. There's a link on their webpage and you can sign up for it. I think well over 200 people have signed up for it so far. The idea is to see how many birds you can find within the winter birding season, which runs from December 1st to the end of February. So obviously that is half over by now. We're in mid-January. But if there's still lots of time to sign up and if you want to. This challenge uses eBird. So when you submit an eBird checklist, ideally within your 5MR, but you don't have to, you share it with the OFO Winter Birding Challenge account and seeing how many species we can collectively see within our for this winter. And there's actually prizes every 2 weeks given out for people who submit. I think it's a certain number of checklists during each 2-week period. So this is a map of where everyone's submitted from, each county. There's actually 3 counties or county equivalents that have not had any data submitted yet. So if there's anyone here from the Rainier River District, from Sudbury District, or from the Manitoulin District, sign and participate so we can color in the map of Ontario in its entirety. And that's about all I have for you today. Here's a great photo of Roberta waving in the snow as she was birding within her 5MR. And so thank you. And my email address is down on the bottom right there. In case you have any questions about 5MR birding, feel free to email me. I think now we're going to open it up to anyone who has any questions. Thanks again, guys.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Carter. That was a great presentation. If there are any burning questions out there, you can start typing them into the chat, and we'll be happy to answer them for you. So we'll just give everybody a couple seconds here, and we'll see what kind of questions we have for you. Oh, someone's saying hi to their Aunt Roberta. That's nice. Fabulous information, Carter, is one of the comments we're getting in. So, and some thumbs up for that. So, I'm just waiting to see if anyone has any questions. Can you have 2 5-mile radius? Can you have a home one and a cottage one?
Yeah, you can. Well, for your own sake, you can have as many 5MRs as you want. For the sake of the Ontario Birding Challenge, though, we're just having everyone do 1 5MR for their primary residence.
Yeah.
It's one thing, too, if you go to your cottage for, the whole summer, then it's, fun to do a 5MR list for there, too. But if it's kind of like a cottage that you're traveling back and forth from constantly, that kind of defeats the purpose from an environmental standpoint, too, So, but yeah, you can... For your own sake, you can have as many 5MRs as you want.
Wonderful. All right. We're just getting lots of great praise for your presentation. People loved it. They loved the challenge as well. So, and I think it's a great challenge too. And I like that your home in East Leamington was pretty much where my border is in the park too. So you picked well. So, here's a question for you. What is your personal favorite birding sighting ever within your 5MR?
Ooh. I think it has to be the Black Vulture because it was just so unexpected. I was sitting on my front porch having a couple drinks on a nice sunny Saturday afternoon, and all of a sudden I see 2 birds tangling up in the sky. I thought they were like eagles doing, their spinning thing that they do there. But then they broke off, and one was a turkey vulture, and I knew instantly the other one wasn't because it didn't go into the dihedral. Got the binoculars up and saw those white wingtips. And luckily my camera was right there beside me because I had 30 seconds to take photos before it disappeared into the sky. And, black vultures are, regular now in southern Ontario and areas, but up here it's not totally unheard of, but pretty crazy. I think it was the 2nd record.
Yeah, it's always great when you get to see birds like that from your yard.
Yeah, totally unexpected.
Yeah, like I've had Mississippi kite like in my parking lot on one of those kite days in the park. I'm pretty lucky where I live. I get some pretty cool things, and I will say that the magnificent frigate bird from a couple years ago, I did get that in my 5-mile radius too. So it's pretty sweet. Somebody here is asking, is the goal to see as many species in your 5-mile radius, and does it include daily checklists?
Kind of, yeah. The goal is to see as many species as you can, but you don't have to, give 100% effort. You can take it as far as you'd like, kind of thing, It's more to challenge yourself to spend more time birding locally and see what you can find. What was the second question? Sorry.
And it doesn't include daily checklists. I'm wondering if this is in relation to the winter birding challenge. And the winter birding challenge, it doesn't matter how many species you see. To be eligible to win one of the prizes, you need to submit 10 checklists within a week period. So I think that might answer that question. Someone is asking, should I report a banded trumpeter swan that I see, and if so, where? There's a Trumpeter Swan Association in Ontario that does the banding. So, and I know they have a Facebook group, so if you look them up, you could report any tagged birds that you see there.
And I think for bird tag birds in general, if you just, I don't know what it is off the top of my head, but if you just Google report a banded bird,
Yeah.
the top should be where you.
Yeah, I think it's the USGS that handles it.
That's it.
Yeah. Someone is, are you planning to do this long term so we can see trends over time?
Yeah, as long as there continues to be interest in it. The way I set it up for 2021 took a lot of the work off my shoulders. Everyone reports themselves to an Excel file online. So that's pretty low maintenance. Last year, it was a lot of work at the end of each month to go through 100 plus emails and copy everyone's totals. But yeah, now that I've made it easier, and if there's continued interest, I don't see why not.
Excellent. Someone's asking if they can see the map that shows where everybody 5MR is for the OFO challenge or for others. I think that map's just for the challenge on the Facebook group, right?
Facebook group challenge.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, I may have missed this, but how do we register our 5MR into the birding challenge? They've set up their personal, but they're unsure what to do next.
Yeah, so I didn't include information on how to do that. If you're on Facebook, go to the 5MR in Ontario Facebook group, and there's information in there, or email me personally. Because the Excel file is like a single link that's long and complicated, it's not easy just to tell you what it is. So.
Okay. Somebody asked if you knew that COVID was coming. Because when you started this, because your timing seemed pretty amazing. So,
no, not lucky there.
Yeah, some people have put the link for the Trumpeter Swan reporting into the chat box there. And somebody's saying they really like the 5MR group for the environmental reasons. Somebody's also saying you might be surprised how many birds you can see. Yeah. I think it's pretty amazing. Even like last spring, just what I saw I live in a condo, so I birded from my balcony, and I had over 60 species from my yard in May this year. It's kind of pale in comparison to what I would have had in the park if I had been able to go birding at Peely, but still, my favorite last year was the Canada Warbler. That just was like right beside me because the tree was right beside my balcony. So I had this Canada Warbler in my face, which was a pretty great experience. So, all right, I'm just going to see, are there any more? Roberta says, thanks for your time and effort in organizing and running the 5MR. All right, this is the last call for questions. We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Oh, thank you, Marcel. He just put up the where to report banded birds link in the chat there. All right. Someone asked, what rarities do you think would not have been found if 5MR didn't exist?
Ooh. I don't know. Off the top of my head, I don't know. I think a lot of the rare birds found in 2020 were ones that were found in popular locations where people bird normally.
Yeah.
I'll have to look at the list and see if there was any that would have been maybe not found if people weren't birding close to home, but there probably were some. I just don't know what.
Somebody wants to know how far a barred owl can travel.
Ooh, I don't know.
Well, I think we're seeing them. They're typically more. Well, it's hard to say because there's such a the distribution in Ontario is kind of weird. Like we
Yeah.
don't get them in the Southwest, like which is just bizarre. And because there's places across the lake from here where you see barred owls, so we're just this weird little trap. So, um,
Well,
yeah,
one of the weirdest birding experiences was running to see a pileated woodpecker in Point Pelee, where
yes,
I see them at home here every day.
yes, yeah. Yeah, I remember the first record, and I just remember people running around after this bird. It was kind of crazy. And the thing is, you go 45 minutes away to Rondo, and they're there, and they nest there. So just,
Yeah.
yeah. Someone had a general question. How many species, 5 mile radius species in 2020 were Ontario firsts?
I think it was just the two, the glaucous winged gull and the tundra bean goose.
Yeah, because
But there
the
was the two that
were like second or third records.
second and thirds, but I think those were the only two that were firsts.
Yeah, hard to believe that variegated flycatcher was the second record for Ontario. Which I was pretty happy that I'd seen it, the first one, so I didn't feel as bad being limited in my travels. Somebody said maybe take 5 mile radius birding to kids, schools. Thanks for this. Absolutely. I think a lot of people are doing the OFO birding challenge with kids. I know my sister and my nephew are doing the challenge as something to help through the lockdown again. So, all right. Well, I think we're going to wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. It was great to see all the good chatter in there, and thank you, Carter, for such a great presentation. I really appreciate you taking the time tonight to do this. We're going to be back with Carter again in 2 weeks, and we're going to be talking about Northern Ontario birding. So if you're interested in what it's all about up there in the north, where they actually have snow, which I'm kind of jealous of, we will be back in a couple of weeks. And we're also have a presentation on eBird in the works as well. So if you want to get some more advice and tips and tricks on how to use eBird effectively, we'll be doing that. We have one last, 5 mile. Carter addressed it at the beginning. It originated in the U.S. That's why it's 5 mile radius. All right, thanks everyone. We have lots of thank yous coming in. Even and your dad said you did a good job. So
he wanted a shout out during this, so I guess
there. Okay, thanks everyone, and have a great night. All right. Well, that went well.